Spurs star striker and England captain Harry Kane says he's not going to make a decision on his club future until after the Euros. And the rumour is that he could potentially agitate for a move if Spurs fail to qualify for the Champions League this year. We're going to talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel, people. I hope you're all good. It's your boy Budge here, and of course you are tuned in to Talk to Budge. Welcome. Please, before we crack on, I need you guys to make sure you wiped your feet before we continue. Wipe your feet at the door, and by that I mean hit the like button first and foremost, hit the subscribe button, and sign up for all notifications, so whenever I drop a new video, which is on a daily basis, you're always the first to find out about it. You're always the first to be able to see, to watch, to hear it, okay? Of course, we've just recently started this platform. We've just recently got the channel started up, and we're building it from scratch, from the ground up. I appreciate all of you guys that have been showing support, showing love so far, but we need to keep it going. We need to keep building this platform, and I need you guys to continue to help me. So share this video and share the channel with your friends, with your family, with your WhatsApp group chats, with your work colleagues, all the rest of it. Just get the word of Talk to Budge out, okay? I need you guys to help me to be able to do that, man. Ultimately, that's how this channel is going to grow. That's how this platform is going to grow. I need your support, man. Thank you very much in advance. Now, the topic of this video is the recent rumors that have surfaced about Harry Kane potentially being willing to agitate for a move away from Spurs should they not qualify for the Champions League this year. Now, it's clear to see, obviously, how important Harry Kane is to Spurs. He has been their most important player for the past 7 years. And you just need to look at his goal scoring exploits and his current tally, and the fact that he is already in the top 10 all-time goal scoring players in the Premier League. I believe he only needs 98 goals to equal Alan Shearer's record of 260 odd Premier League goals. So that tells you everything that you need to know about how important Harry Kane is to Spurs, of course, who aren't necessarily doing particularly well, and also in terms of Premier League all-time leading goal scorers. Now, this current season, Harry Kane has contributed 19 goals and 13 assists so far and played 28 games. His current contract at Spurs is until 2024. So what happened is, back in 2018, whilst Pochettino was still manager at Spurs, of course, things were on the up and up for Spurs. They were talking about moving into their new state-of-the-art built stadium. There was a very much a feel-good factor about the club at that point in time. I remember when they finished second behind Antonio Conte's Chelsea, and, you know, you got the likes of Dele Alli, who was in great form, Son, who was emerging, and Harry Winks, and all this kind of stuff, right? So everything was looking very positive. And around that time, Harry Kane signed a graveyard shift deal kind of thing, where he signed a 6-year deal at the club. And of course, he did so because everything was looking positive. Ultimately, you know, things are on the up and up. And so because he's been at the club and came through the youth system and so on and so forth, he felt like, you know, things were definitely looking positive. And so he was willing to commit that his long-term future to the club, right? So at this point in time, he has 3 years left on that deal at the club, right? So the club ultimately are in a position where they are in no need to sell. They have all the bargaining chips ultimately, because the player still has a lengthy amount of time left on his current deal. And everyone will remember, because everybody was speaking about it when it happened, a interview that Harry Kane did with Jamie Redknapp for Sky, I think about a year ago. And there were certain quotes that were taken from that interview that would, of course, have made Spurs fans worry a little bit and made the ears of other clubs stand to attention. And in that interview, Harry Kane was talking about his future at Spurs and talking about his ambitions. Of course, Spurs haven't won a significant trophy for only God knows how long. They are, of course, in the Carabao Cup final against Manchester City this season. So that could potentially be the first trophy, should they come through and win that Harry Kane has lifted at the club. But his quotes in that interview were, and I quote, "I love Spurs. I will always love Spurs, but it's one of those things. I've always said if I don't feel we're progressing as a team or going in the right direction, then I'm not someone just to stay there for the sake of it. I'm an ambitious player. I want to improve. I want to get better. I want to become one of the top players. It all depends on what happens as a team and how we progress as a team. So it's not a definite that I'm going to stay there forever, but it's not a no either." And of course, naturally, with those kind of quotes, it is going to start speculation. Because, as you know, it's come out recently and has been broken by The Athletic, they have it on good authority that Harry Kane will be willing to agitate and go and speak to Daniel Levy at Spurs about a potential move if they fail to qualify for the Champions League yet again for another season. And you've got to look at it from his perspective. Whilst he does have 3 years left of on his contract, he's been the leading goal scorer for Spurs and in and amongst the conversation of top goal scorers in the Premier League for a number of seasons now. He is 27 currently, but in the next few months will be turning 28. And so he's looking at it as, right, I am getting into the prime of my career. I have a few years left at the very top level, or at the peak of my powers, shall we say. And I'm at a club who isn't winning trophies, who isn't challenging for trophies, and there's no sign of that being the case in the next few years. And I ultimately don't want to waste the prime of my career without winning trophies. He said in those quotes that he wants to be in and amongst the very top players. He wants to be challenging for honours. He wants to be winning trophies. And he doesn't necessarily feel like he has that opportunity at Spurs at this point in time. And certainly not if they yet again fail to qualify for the Champions League again come the end of this season. And of course, it is a very, very tricky one because, he's a fan of the club. He loves the club. He's been at the club for a number of years and so on and so forth. But ultimately, he wants to make something of his career. And it is challenging for a number of reasons, right? So whilst he has the ambition to win these trophies and these honours at Spurs, you've got to look at it and look at the wider context. Spurs have a number of issues at the moment. They have built this state-of-the-art stadium, and of course, the finance that goes behind building a stadium is quite sizable, right? So they're going to be paying off the debt to finance that stadium for the coming years. So naturally, there's going to be less money to invest in the club on that front because of the fact that they are committing so much money to that stadium and have done so. So there's less money on that front. You've got the situation where the manager, Jose Mourinho, has negotiated a contract that means that ultimately, if he was sacked and they had to let him go, then they would still need to pay him the entirety of his salary that he negotiated for the term of his contract. That's a huge outlay. You can imagine someone like Jose Mourinho coming into a club. He's going to go for a king's ransom ultimately. So Tottenham have that issue to deal with. And then on top of that, because finances are limited, it's a difficulty for them to invest in more and better players, particularly within their defence, because of the fact that finances are so limited. So they're underperforming under Mourinho. They can't necessarily let him go because it's going to cost a king's ransom to let him go and bring in another manager. And they have other areas on the pitch that they need to strengthen and improve as well. So it's like a perfect cauldron of issues that they have at the club as it pertains to finances. And then when you add on top of that the issues that COVID-19 and the loss of match day and broadcast revenues for the club, they've come out and said that according to rumours that they estimate the club's losses this season to be around the £200 million mark. So you can see just how difficult it is at this present moment in time when it comes to finances and reinvesting in the club for them to be going on and challenging for honours in years to come. And naturally, these are all of the kind of things that Harry Kane will be considering when he's thinking about his future. Now, the issue is that everybody knows that Daniel Levy is a very shrewd negotiator and he drives a very hard bargain. So with all of those things considered and where the club are financially at this point in time and Harry Kane's relative importance to that club, there's no way that, and the fact also that he's still got 3 years left on his current deal, there is no way that Daniel Levy is going to allow Harry Kane to leave that club for anything less than what he values him at, right? And we're talking 100 million plus. And so when you consider that, you know that there are only a handful of clubs that are going to be able to front up that kind of cash, right? There's only a handful of clubs that are going to be willing to pay that kind of money for a striker, particularly in this climate, in this COVID-19 coronavirus climate where every club is cash stricken and every club has to manage their finances that much more astutely. Very few clubs are going to be able to shell out the outlay to bring in a player like Harry Kane, despite the fact that so many clubs are going to be needing a striker in future. You know, you've got Mbappe, who seems to be running down his contract and potentially will not sign an extension at PSG. So there's rumours linking him to different clubs. You've got Haaland, who notably has that 70-odd million pound release clause that is going to be active from 2022, and the fact that he's been linked with every man and his dog and all the European elite clubs at this present moment in time. You've got I believe it's Andre Silva potentially in the Bundesliga playing for Eintracht Frankfurt, who is a player that teams are looking at. Everyone seems to be in the hunt for a striker. And of course, naturally, because of the confirmation that we've got now that Sergio Agueros is going to be leaving Manchester City come the end of the season, naturally, they are also being linked with a striker, right? And they are amongst the clubs, I think maybe three or four clubs, if we're being honest, is Manchester City, Manchester United, Barcelona. I mean, that also is potentially questionable because of the fact that they have a lot of debt and a lot of issues, but I think they've been able to secure a huge loan off the back of the recent appointment in terms of the presidency at the club. And you've got Real Madrid. So those are the few clubs that can pay that kind of money, right? But when clubs look at it, so for example, a Manchester City, it depends on how they see the importance of the striker situation, right? And the finances of the club going forward, because they could potentially make an argument to say, in relative terms, in terms of, you know, the potential value of and what they're getting from a player, if they're putting down that kind of outlay and they're spending 100 million plus on a player, wouldn't a player like Haaland or Mbappe offer more value in the long term to the club because of the fact that they're younger and so they're going to get more of their prime years out of them? So wouldn't they favour signing one of those players over a Harry Kane, for example? You could look at it from that perspective. Or you could look at it from the perspective of, right, Harry Kane is prem proven. He is getting into the prime of his career now. He's going to be 28. You've recently just tied down Kevin De Bruyne on a long-term deal. He's in the prime of his career now. He's 29. So is it a matter of more immediate success? Right. For the next few years, we want to be challenging in the Champions League. So we want Harry Kane, for example, who we know is a top goal scorer in the Premier League. You know, we know that he is proven, primed, ready to go and whatnot. Doesn't need a bedding in period because he's been playing in the Premier League for 7 years, so on and so forth. Let's just go in, let's spend the big money and get the returns immediately. Or is it a more of a long-term view that, you know, we want a player for the next 10 years, for example? It all boils down to how teams like Manchester City, who, whilst they have so much resource and they're backed by so much money, they still will have to navigate through this COVID situation very, very astutely as well. And the thing about it is, another thing to consider is when you look at past performance in terms of clubs that have opted for the more proven player who's later on in his career or who is in his prime, it hasn't necessarily always gone well. You've got Juventus, who spent 90 million euros on Gonzalo Higuain at 28 years old. And that didn't necessarily work when it comes to looking at, pushing on to get Champions League, for example. Juventus, who spent 100 million on Cristiano Ronaldo at 33 years of age. And that project at this present moment in time, we can say is unsuccessful because they haven't been able to win the Champions League. You've got Barcelona, who spent 120 million euros on Antoine Griezmann at 28 years old. And they still haven't won the Champions League since doing so. You've got Real Madrid, who spent 100 million on Eden Hazard at 28 years old. And whilst they have been successful in the Champions League, his signing at this point in time ultimately hasn't been a success. So, you know, all of those things have to be taken into consideration when you're looking at signing a player for huge money at this stage of his career. And Harry Kane will be no different. And ultimately, these are the kind of things that clubs will be considering when it comes to potentially signing Harry Kane or going for, let's say, Danny Ings, who might be the same age as Harry Kane, but in financial terms is going to cost a lot less, and who can, contribute and chip in with goals and assists, as we've seen him do on so many occasions for Southampton. You put him in a better player with better team, you put him in a better team, with better players around him who can create better chances for him. His goal scoring exploits are going to improve. So those are the kind of things that are going to be considered in this COVID situation, and with all of the issues that it has had and the knock-on impact that it's had on clubs' finances. And that's why it's a very difficult position for Harry Kane to be in, and why ultimately, whilst he can go and agitate and speak to Daniel Levy about wanting to move and wanting to get a move to a different club, at the end of the day, he has 3 years left on his current deal. Daniel Levy is in no position, or he's not forced, his hand isn't forced to sell. And if he is going to sell, he's going to do it for a king's ransom, because that money then needs to be reinvested in the club in other areas. So Harry Kane is in a perilous position. Ultimately, he's in a very, very difficult position. And ultimately, he is dependent on the club being willing to negotiate or being understanding of his point of view and his perspective, which is very, very difficult. You're ultimately relying on a favor from Daniel Levy, which I can't see happening based on, again, previous performance. He's a notoriously difficult negotiator. He digs his heels in until he gets the valuation of the player that he expects. We saw it with Dimitar Berbatov. We saw it with Gareth Bale. And so whilst I get where Harry Kane's coming from, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for him. And unless a team like Manchester City or a team like Manchester United are willing to splash big cash in the short term for short-term success, most notably in the Champions League, Harry Kane is going to find it very, very difficult to negotiate a deal away from Spurs. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. I've spoken enough about it. That's my point of view. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think it is going to be easy for Harry Kane to negotiate and move away from Spurs? Do you think Spurs are going to be willing to sell him, given all of the things that we spoke about in this video in terms of, the club's finances and wanting to reinvest in elsewhere, and the fact that they've got long-term projects that they're committed to, that they obviously need to raise finance for, and that kind of thing? Do you think that we can see, after the Euros, we can see Harry Kane getting a move away from Spurs to a Manchester City, to a Manchester United, abroad as well, potentially? Is there any likelihood in that? Do you think that clubs abroad are willing to sign a player like Harry Kane, or do you feel that the future is ultimately going to lie with Haaland and Mbappe for those overseas clubs? What's your take on the matter? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Another reminder to like, subscribe, sign up to all notifications, and help me grow and boost this platform. That's it for now. I'm going to catch you guys on the next video. Until then, Budge over and out.